You tweeted about it was satire, which you do very often, and I've heard you speak about this, where you talk about how if you thought Ukraine was bad, just wait until you see the plan of destruction for Taiwan. And you sent me an article I'll pull up, but I want to get your reaction to this tweet, the story behind it, because it's gone viral. China, Taiwan. There's news stories about it seemingly each day. Garland, please just give the audience here a picture of what happened.
Yeah, so I tweeted, I do regular satirical tweets, and I'll say breaking news, and it usually goes something like this. Breaking news, White House insiders leaked that when asked about, and then I'll say something, and Joe Biden, or let's say Joe Biden responded, and then I'll have something, and it's something satirical. But sometimes it may say Kremlin insiders, CIA insiders, whatever, right? And I'll do that, leak that, and I'll come up with some satire. Well, this particular day, I put White House insiders leaked that when asked about if there could possibly be anything worse or any greater disaster than the neocons Ukraine project. President Biden responded, "Wait until you see our plan for the destruction of Taiwan." Well, apparently the citizens of Taiwan who were legislators started retweeting that. It went viral in Taiwan. It went viral in China, and news popped up everywhere. The Taiwan's like foreign minister or whoever went to the U.S. State Department and asked them if it was true. The Chinese started demanding a response for the U.S. for the plan for destruction of Taiwan. There were like these intellectuals. It was on all the news shows. There were like these intellectuals from various universities. I literally was watching this one and reading it, the one that was interpreted, where this guy was saying, yes, that the President Biden probably has explosives set all over the island, and he probably has saboteurs already, so that as soon as he gives the go ahead, they can blow the island to smithereens, right? And that was about and as soon as I looked at it, I realized that was about Nord Stream. That when I said that the people in that region looked at how the U.S. treated its allies and thought, well, it's only reasonable. It never dawned on me, but they thought it's only reasonable if Biden's blowing up Germany and all this stuff's going on in Ukraine. It only makes sense that it would add up that they do it to us too. So that's why the tweet went viral and crazy, and that's why people believed it. And it, like, a couple of days ago, now this was over a week ago, a couple of days ago, I looked and it had like 150 million hits in one day. This was like a week and a half after it was tweeted. It has gone completely insane, but it's because I never thought of it. It's reasonable for people to suspect that the Biden team's going to blow them to smithereens. They did it to Ukraine and their ostensible ally in Germany.
Welcome, Carl. Thanks. Well, that was a great introduction, Garland. We have Carl here on the stream. Welcome. How are you this morning for you? How are you? Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
Mute. Hi, guys. Hi, Danny. Hi, Garland. A great fan, Garland. I'm a great fan. I love your satiric tweet. But in this day of age, sometimes it's hard to tell what is parody or not.
Yeah,
that's Carl. Did you hear about that? I mean, have you heard about the whole hoopla over this thing?
So I was actually completely out. I was playing Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas for the past 3 weeks.
Okay.
And I just logged back on Twitter like a few days ago, and wham, I was hit by like the wave of anti-China rhetorics. Like, yeah. I'm pretty familiar with anti-China rhetorics coming from mainstream media in US, but I was not prepared for like the speed and the ferocity of things that's been pumped out over the last 3 weeks. I've been gone. And like, it's so ironic because the game I was playing, Fallout, for the people gamers out there, Fallout is about, the whole premise of the game is about post-nuclear apocalyptic world after China and US went to war against each other. And here I am logging back on Twitter, and all the US officials are talking about China is going to start a war in 2025. Or no, first they said China is going to start a war in 2027. And now we have a leaked Pentagon memo saying China is going to start a war with US in 2025. And then this is immediately after all that crazy weather balloon fiasco. And on top of that, we have a CNN reporter embedded on a US spy plane flying on top of South China Sea. And he's wondering, why is that Chinese fighter jet flying so close to us? I mean, like, you can't make this shit up. People, a lot of people, because people in US, people have busy lives, so we consume news passively, right? So they might, oh my God, China is being aggressive again. But, if you just think about it, think for a second. This is a U.S. mainstream reporter inside a U.S. spy plane flying on top of South China Sea, wondering why the Chinese fighter plane are flying so close to them. It's like,
it's
duh. And it's comedy. It's comedy. That's why I really appreciate your the parody that you bring to us, Garland. I mean, this is you're. Half of the time, sometimes I have to double check to make sure whether it's satire or it's real news.
Well,
before you get into Garland, I want to just I want to share you sent this today. We were looking at this right before we came on, Garland, about where has this gone since. I mean, this tweet is not necessarily recent in Twitter terms. I guess it's relatively recent in real terms, but this Yahoo News article cites the tweet because, I mean, all of Chinese leadership has been asking about this, maybe minus Xi Jinping, but you've had foreign ministry spokespeople ask about this. And now you have the foreign minister himself, Qin Gang, demand the United States explain its plans for the destruction of Taiwan. And then we can go down further into the article. While Qin did not give details of the plan, Garland Nixon, an American radio program host, said last month that U.S. President Joe Biden had warned about the destruction of Taiwan. So I wanted to show that to let everyone know that this has grown legs. And as you explained earlier, Garland, people in Taiwan, Chinese people in Taiwan, and of course, people in China have also been asking about this.
Let me add this. I have friends, friends that have, the people that I regularly interview and talk to about China, as you said, KJ No and George Koo and various people. But what they've said was they've been, talk to people who, either are in Taiwan or have connections, and they say that it opened a conversation about. You've got these people in Taiwan and they're not really thinking about if a war broke out, what would happen to us? And it opened a conversation there about, wait a minute, what would happen to us? We'd be blown to smithereens. We'd be at war we'd be the battleground for the war between two nuclear superpowers where, we get turned into Ukraine. So it created a conversation, a realistic conversation for people to think about Ukraine and the plan for destruction. Apparently that conversation turned into kind of similar to Nord Stream, where they were saying, do they actually have bombs here? And then people started talking about was like a year old, the Pentagon had this there were articles where the Pentagon said, well, if there were a war, we should blow up the TSMC's factory so that China couldn't get it. And so that whole conversation that they're being used as a pawn and that they could lose their lives, their property, their jobs, and all that came out into the open. Though it wasn't intentional, it's positive because sometimes a person needs to be shocked back to reality a little bit in order to make decisions that are in their own best interest.
Well, Carl, could you talk about, maybe following up on that, talk about some of these latest developments with Taiwan? Maybe both of you could, because there's been a new military aid package, possible missiles for F-16s, and a lot more. McCarthy's visit, the House Speaker, now the Republican majority House Speaker, saying he was going to go to Taiwan. Now he's going to meet with Tsai Ing-wen in Washington. Could you go over a bit about what's been happening in the background that may lead to this kind of reaction, both on the island of Taiwan and in broader China generally?
I wanted to point out, all this talk about China threatening to invade Taiwan in 2027 or 2025, this is all being in the English language media. Like in Chinese, you don't find anything. Like Chinese government is not making any statement about we're going to invade Taiwan. We must unify with Taiwan in the next 5 years or next, even they didn't even say even next 10 years. What Xi Jinping actually said was we're committed to peaceful unification with Taiwan. And in the English media is that's turned into Xi Jinping is threatening to go to war over Taiwan, which is, it's really 1984. And yes, McCarthy, we know what U.S. is trying to do. They're very disappointed that they did not provoke China into aggressive action after Nancy Pelosi visit. And this is what U.S. is trying to do right now. First of all, there was a Twitter space a couple of days ago hosted by some, NFT bro talking about U.S.-China war. I dropped in to listen for a few minutes and I couldn't stand it anymore because these guys know nothing about China. They know nothing about the China-Taiwan situation, and they still think we're back in 1950. Like in the early part of the Cold War. That's where a lot of the American mindset is coming from. They don't realize what would mean if U.S. and China go to war today. It'll be the end of the civilization as we know it. Nobody wins in a nuclear exchange. Let me just put it out there first. And China is not trying to start a war. Why? Because the time is on China's side. Every year, Chinese economy is growing bigger, stronger, and relative to United States, China is gaining in strength year by year. So why would China rush in to do something in 2025 when in 2030 China will be even stronger than United States? It does not make sense at all. It is a U.S. Pentagon, all the think tanks, now they're circling the wagons. They're saying that we have a very small, limited time window to contain China because China is growing. If we allow China to grow in this current trajectory, China is going to surpass United States in economic strength and military strength in in foreseeable future, not very far off. And that's why they think they have this limited time window between 5 to 10 years to do something about China's rise, to leverage the overwhelming power of the current United States military might. And this is the thing. United States is the one that's itching for confrontation, and that's why there have been insane level of provocation for the last few years. We've seen that with Nancy Pelosi's visit. Nancy Pelosi didn't visit Taiwan on her own private jet. She didn't even go on commercial jet. I don't think she ever go on commercial jet, but she went on U.S. Air Force jet, right? And she got a U.S. Air Force fighter escort to fly into Taiwan. And thankfully, China actually acted rationally. China did not shoot her down. Did not give U.S. a cause for wider war. So now U.S. just cranking up the provocation. Keep on escalating. Now after Nancy Pelosi is gone, now we're gonna have the new speaker going to Taiwan. We're just gonna try to goad China into doing something. If they do something, then bang, we can hit them with our might. And this is stupid. Nobody's asking the American people, why is this all necessary? Why do we even have to have a confrontational relationship with China? Everything was working. After the Nixon visit China in 1970s, things has been going well for most part. There's like up and downs, but most part is peaceful. But it's really in the last 5 years, it's really retching up the war talk. And we're in a very, very dangerous territory here because the U.S. military industrial complex, for them, everything is a game. They talk up the tension with China so they can justify the $1 trillion defense spending we continually pour into our defense industry. And this includes I forgot the figure. I think it was like $680 million dollars arms deal they approved to sell Taiwan. The thing is, the arms deal is not doing what they're proposed to do. They're saying we're shoring up defense of Taiwan. Well, then why you're selling them outdated weapons? U.S. never sell like the top of the line weapons to Taiwan. They give them the outdated weapons. Why? Because there's a fear in the Pentagon. All these weapons will end up in the hands of China a few years down the road. That's why. So now it's really we're just trying to squeeze as much as we can from Taiwan's U.S. dollar currency reserve, because Taiwan is one of those countries that have stockpiled U.S. dollar currency reserve from their trade surplus with U.S. So now it's all about grift, right? But they can't come out and say it in public. It's all about making money for us, kickback from our Raytheon and Lockheed Martin buddies. They can't say that. They say, no, we have to defend democracy. We have to make a stand in the Pacific. United States must be the leader in Asia. U.S. ambassador to China actually came out and said that China must recognize U.S. as a leader in Asia. Like, first of all, if you're a leader, you don't go around ask people, you need to recognize me as a leader. If you're a leader, you just lead. People follow. You don't have to go around people banging on the table and demanding people to recognize you as a leader. And the fact that why is U.S. wanting to be a leader all the way across the Pacific on the other side of the globe? Why is U.S. devoting so much of its capital, it's a diplomatic military muscles to be number one on the other side of the globe? It does not make sense when there's so much that needs to be done within the United States right now. We just have that big chemical spill in Ohio, East Palestine, right? I mean, that should be the biggest news. If that had happened in China, all the mainstream news will be reporting on it 24/7.
Yeah. There would be heads rolling. There would be a lot of replacements in the government.
Yeah,
too.
And they actually arrested a reporter on the scene. I mean, can you imagine the level of rhetorics that coming from mainstream media if something happened in China? But this is the United States, so we kind of just pretend, this is just normal. This is normal. We have the worst, probably one of the worst chemical incident in decades, and they arrested a reporter, and this is just normal. We should just accept it.
It happened again too in Springfield, Ohio, just a few days ago, and that there's been even less news coverage on that. But Garland, I don't know if you want to follow, or Carl, did you finish? I don't know if you finished.
Just one more thing.
Gotcha.
And right now, we are also engaged in this proxy war in Ukraine against Russia. We're fighting Russian to the last Ukrainians, and things are not going well in the Ukrainian war. So what we do, we go to the so-called European ally, our vassal states, and asking them to come up with a plan to sanction China for Chinese possible aids to Russia. It's like China. First of all, China has not supplied Russia with weapons, but U.S. is always acting like China is, and is already drafting a plan with the European allies to sanction China. Look, can we just wrap up one conflict at a time? This is crazy. For them, it's this is just media manipulation, right? Of course, they want to really distract the public from the bombshell that Seymour Hersh dropped about U.S. involvement in blowing up Nord Stream 2, right? That's a real news. And the fact that there was a big worst chemical spill incident in U.S. history in Ohio. But instead, let's talk about Chinese balloons. Let's talk about Chinese fighter jet flying close to our spy plane in South China Sea. Let's talk about blowing up Taiwan so China cannot have Taiwan's semiconductor industry. This is crazy. When I was living in U.S. a few years back, I think because I was in that environment, you kind of accept it. Okay, United States is crazy. Now I live outside the country for a few years. I look back, I look in. U.S. is crazy. We have crazies in charge here. What's going on? Maybe you guys can explain to me what's going on here.
Well, I think Carl kind of hit the nail on the head here when he said the crazies are in charge. Because what's happening is irrational. So to a rational person, we look at it and we say, this doesn't make sense. And to me, they're very, very desperate, because the ruling elite in this class know that our system of capitalism, this predatory neoliberal capitalism, a predator needs prey, a parasite needs a host. And they know that they're having problems now because Russia and China and some of the other countries are able to compete with them in Africa, in South America, for precious minerals and various things that they need, that they traditionally preyed on these weaker countries and simply took their resources and overthrew their governments. Now they're unable to do that anymore. Now the U.S. empire is unable to prey on anybody they want around the world, because there are other people who can offer alternatives, China, Russia, etc. And they're desperate and they're irrational and they don't know what to do. And so now they're saying the rules-based order, you're violating the rules-based order. And what in fact is the rules-based order? Because there's a rules-based order, but nobody can find the rules and they can't direct us to it. And what my interpretation of the rules-based order is quite simple. It's an international feudalism. They're saying that this is a hierarchical system and we're at the top. We are the class of nobility. The commoners would be, I guess, the Europeans, and everybody else is the peasants. And we're trying to maintain this international feudalism where we have the prerogative to do anything we want around the world. But the peasants and what have you can only do what we tell them. And that's the order. They can't come out and say that the rules are the rules of feudalism. Now, the so-called peasants, China, Africa, the Middle East, Latin America, are all saying, well, you know, we don't have to go by your rules anymore, and we're not going to. And they are being irrational. They don't know how to deal with that. Internally, when we say, well, how come they're not dealing with the internal issues? Because they are so upset and desperate that they're afraid that their predatory capitalism is going to fall apart and they'll lose everything. And so they're reaching in all different directions. I mean, one of the things you mentioned, they are stuck. They are trapped in the Ukraine conflict. They've got a tiger by the tail, as they say. They can't let go and they can't hold on. They have no idea how to get out of it. They're just making up one narrative after the other. Now they're saying, yes, the Russians are literally, they're saying they're fighting with shovels. Have you seen that? They literally said, yes, they're throwing human waves and fighting with shovels. Well, you know what? It sounds good if that were true. The problem they have is these narratives are untrue. And all they have left now is the narratives that they can feed to the people internally. As Carl said, externally, people are looking at them and saying, these people are out of their minds. They're blind ideologues. And internally, they keep feeding the narratives. The problem they have is two things. Number one, the Ukraine conflict is not going their way and never will. Number two, they don't have till 2025, 27. They have, in my opinion, until the next Taiwan election. And when that happens, the KMT is going to win. It appears, unless something dramatic changes. When that happens, they're not going to have their quisling government in Taiwan, and they lose what little argument they have for Taiwan independence or whatever. I think that's why they're making so much noise on the Korean Peninsula now, because they're like, oh, if we don't get something going here in Thailand, that's kind of falling apart. I know, we'll stir up trouble in North Korea and we'll try to use that. They're desperate to do anything they can. So we're just looking at desperate people. I always say they're kind of like a man who falls in the water that doesn't know how to swim. He's desperately grabbing in every direction for anything he can grab to pull himself out of, but he can't get his hands on anything. And they don't know what to do. Let me add this. Look at their Israeli project. That's coming unglued. The Israeli government now literally, they're like madmen there. They're flipping out. They're threatening Taiwan. They literally, in Israel, if people haven't been following it, you have members of the Israeli Air Force saying, we are not going to report to duty because we're angry because of internal political problems in Israel. So everything in all directions is falling apart for these people, and they don't know what to do. And the situation here is politically collapsing.